which says our family is extremely saddened by the death of Adam. We ask for privacy as we grieve his loss. Adam Harrison was just 39 years old.
The Harrison family became famous through Pawn Stars, but Rick Harrison's son Adam lived far from the spotlight. In January 2024, Adam suddenly died at just 39. What happened afterward raised even more questions. Investigators uncovered disturbing details about his private life, including discoveries inside his garage and living space. So what was really happening during Adam's final days? And what did these discoveries reveal about the Harrison son viewers barely knew? The secret son behind the Pawn Stars family. Rick Harrison built one of the most recognizable businesses in television history. What began as a family-run pawn shop in Las Vegas eventually became the setting for Pawn Stars, a reality series watched by millions of people around the world. Fans quickly became familiar with Rick, his father, Richard Benjamin Harrison, better known as the Old Man, and Rick's son, Corey, affectionately nicknamed Big Hoss by viewers. But behind the familiar faces was another member of the Harrison family whom most viewers never got to know. His name was Adam Harrison. Adam was the second child from Rick's marriage to his first wife, Kim. Within the family, however, Adam was known by a nickname that was very different from the name appearing on official records. He was reportedly called Wax, a name that those close to him recognized long before the public ever learned who he was. Unlike his older brother Corey, Adam never became part of the Pawn Stars television cast. He did not stand in front of the cameras negotiating over rare collectibles, explaining unusual items to customers, or appearing alongside his father and grandfather. Instead, Adam maintained a much quieter existence, largely separated from the public attention that followed the Harrison family. At different points, Adam reportedly worked at the family's pawn shop, contributing behind the scenes while his relatives became increasingly recognizable faces on television. He was part of the family business, but he never appeared to have the same interest in becoming a public personality that Corey did. When Pawn Stars premiered in July 2009, few could have predicted just how massive the show would become. The series quickly turned the gold and silver pawn shop into one of Las Vegas's most recognizable attractions and became one of the History Channel's biggest hits. Over the years, episodes were repeatedly broadcast, streamed, and rewatched by millions, while tourists traveled to Las Vegas specifically to visit the famous shop they had seen on television. Yet despite all that attention, one immediate member of the Harrison family remained almost completely invisible. Adam continued living outside the spotlight while his father and brother became household names. For years, casual viewers could watch Pawn Stars without realizing that Rick Harrison had another son at all. But that anonymity would not last forever. In January 2024, Adam's name suddenly became impossible to ignore, and the circumstances surrounding his death would expose a deeply tragic chapter of the Harrison family story that television had never shown. The first devastating loss of the Harrison family. Long before Adam's death shook the Harrison family, they had already experienced the devastating loss of the man who helped build the foundation of everything they would eventually become known for. Richard Harrison, affectionately known to millions of Pawn Stars viewers as the Old Man, co-founded the gold and silver pawn shop with his son Rick in 1989, long before television cameras ever entered their lives. For years, Richard helped establish the family business and develop the experience that would later become such an important part of the show. When Pawn Stars premiered in 2009, he quickly became one of its most recognizable and beloved personalities. His dry sense of humor, sharp wit, blunt opinions, and decades of hard-earned knowledge made him a natural favorite among viewers. Richard remained an important part of Pawn Stars for years, appearing alongside Rick, Corey, and the other familiar faces at the shop. However, as his health declined, he eventually stepped back from the series in 2017. The following year, the Harrison family suffered another major loss. In June 2018, Richard passed away at the age of 77 after a long battle with Parkinson's disease.
Friends and family are remembering a Las Vegas celebrity known affectionately as the Old Man on the television show Pawn Stars. Today, 77-year-old Richard Harrison was laid to rest.
His death marked the end of an era for the family and for the show itself. For millions of viewers, the Old Man had become More than just a television personality, he was part of the identity of Pawn Stars, and his absence was immediately felt. Rick shared the heartbreaking news with fans directly, describing his father as a friend, a father, and a teacher. The words reflected the complicated role Richard had played in his life, not simply as a parent, but as a mentor and business partner who had helped shape the man Rick eventually became. The loss was painful for the Harrison family, but there was something different about Richard's passing.
When Harrison passed away in 2018, his obituary in the New York Times revealed that he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and that it was ultimately the official cause of death.
His final years had been witnessed, at least partially, by the public. Fans had years of memories, countless episodes, familiar jokes, and moments they could revisit. Tributes poured in, and viewers around the world had a connection to the man they had watched on television for nearly a decade. Adam's death would be different in almost every way. There would be no decade of on-screen memories, no farewell episodes, and no long public goodbye. Instead, there was a private life that ended suddenly, followed by a family accustomed to living in the spotlight being forced to mourn someone the public had barely known existed. The Harrison brothers took very different paths. Being part of a famous family does not always mean living a famous life. For Adam Harrison, growing up in the Harrison family meant watching his father and brother gradually become household names while he remained almost completely outside the public eye. As Pawn Stars grew into a television phenomenon, Rick and Corey appeared in magazines, television specials, interviews, promotional material, and countless online clips. Adam, meanwhile, continued living quietly, with very little of his personal life exposed to the public. That contrast became even more striking when childhood photographs of Adam were later shared by members of his family. One particularly revealing image showed Adam as a young boy splashing around in a bathtub alongside his brother Corey. There was nothing glamorous or staged about the moment. It was simply two brothers enjoying an ordinary childhood together, long before cameras, fame, and television would transform the Harrison family's life. Those private memories offered a glimpse of a side of the family that viewers rarely saw. To the public, the Harrisons were the larger-than-life personalities from Pawn Stars. Behind the scenes, however, they were still a family raising children, celebrating birthdays, sharing ordinary moments, and building relationships away from the cameras. As the years passed, Rick's family continued to grow. He later had another son, Jake, with his second wife, Tracy. The Harrison family tree became more complicated with each passing year, but Adam remained a background figure. He was rarely mentioned publicly, even as the family's television success reached heights that few could have predicted. Corey's path could not have been more different. He became one of the most recognizable faces in reality television, developing a public identity built around his work at the pawn shop, his sharp negotiating skills, and his larger-than-life personality. Viewers watched him grow from Rick's son, working in the family business, into a familiar television personality in his own right. Adam, meanwhile, remained almost completely unknown to the same audience. The difference was striking because the two brothers had started in the same place. They shared the same home, the same family, and even those ordinary childhood moments captured in photographs decades before fame entered their lives. But as the years passed, their paths moved further and further apart. One brother appeared in living rooms across the country every week. The other lived a life that almost nobody outside his close friends and family ever truly got to see. And behind that quiet distance from the cameras, difficulties were beginning to build. Problems that almost nobody outside the family circle fully understood until it was too late. The private battle behind the Harrison name. Fame protects very little when it comes to personal struggles, and the Harrison family was no exception. In the years leading up to 2024, Adam reportedly faced serious personal difficulties, including a period of incarceration that kept him out of public life entirely for months at a time. After that chapter closed, Adam moved into a small guest house in the Las Vegas area, starting what seemed like an attempt to rebuild. According to later reports, he had only been living there for around 2 weeks before tragedy struck. A woman living nearby in an RV parked between the main house and the guest house later told investigators she had noticed troubling behavior in the days before his death, including Adam barricading himself inside by pushing furniture against the door. It was a small but unsettling detail that hinted at a person quietly struggling, largely unnoticed, right up until the very end. Neighbors in situations like this one often describe similar patterns after the fact, small warning signs that seem obvious only in hindsight. Isolation, unpredictable behavior, and withdrawal from regular routines are frequently mentioned by those closest to someone in crisis, even when nobody fully understands the depth of the problem while it is actually happening. Unlike his brother, whose daily life was documented on camera for a national audience, Adam had almost no public record of his day-to-day struggles at all. There were no interviews describing his mental state, no cameras following him through difficult stretches, no producers checking in on his well-being between takes. Whatever difficulties he faced during those final months, he appeared to be facing largely on his own, inside a small guest house far removed from the business's success story built around his own family name. Nobody watching the Harrison family from the outside had any idea just how close that struggle was about to reach its breaking point. The tragic discovery inside the garage. On January 19, 2024, the Harrison family's world changed forever. Concern had reportedly begun growing after Adam Harrison had not been seen since January 17th. At first, there was no way for anyone outside his immediate circle to know what was happening behind the doors of the small guest house where he had been staying. Then someone finally went to check on him. Adam was found dead inside the property. He was just 39 years old. The news was devastating, particularly because Adam had lived such a private life for most of his years. While millions of people recognized the Harrison name through Pawn Stars, very few viewers had ever seen Adam or understood the life he had been living away from the cameras. Once a representative of the family confirmed his death publicly, the news spread quickly. A short statement was released on behalf of the Harrisons, expressing their deep sadness over the loss while asking the public to respect the family's privacy as they mourned. At that early stage, the exact circumstances surrounding Adam's death had not yet been fully established. His death was initially described publicly as an leaving many questions still unanswered. Rick Harrison broke his silence by sharing a photo with Adam and a brief, emotional tribute. For once, the television personality wasn't speaking as a star, but as a grieving father. Corey Harrison also shared his grief publicly. He posted a childhood photograph of himself and Adam together, offering viewers a rare glimpse into the brothers' lives long before Pawn Stars existed.
Corey also shares a tribute to Adam following news of his death. He writes on his social media page, alongside a childhood photo of the two taking a bath.
His tribute made clear that beneath the television personalities and family business was a relationship between two brothers who had grown up together. Condolences soon poured in from far beyond the Harrison family. Friends, public figures, fans, and longtime followers of Pawn Stars shared messages of sympathy online, showing just how far the Harrison name had reached, even though Adam himself had never appeared on the series. For a family accustomed to having cameras document almost every major chapter of their lives, this loss was painfully different. There was no television episode prepared for it, no carefully produced farewell, no opportunity to explain everything to the audience. There was only grief. And then investigators began looking more closely at what had happened inside that guest house, revealing details that would make Adam's final hours even more difficult to understand. What was found inside? In the days following Adam's death, investigators searching the guest house reportedly found several items near where he had been staying, including vials of a substance that was never publicly identified in detail, along with folded foil, lighters, and other materials connected to substance use. These findings painted a quiet but devastating picture of somebody dealing with addiction largely alone, far from the family business and the cameras that once surrounded his household. It was a stark contrast to the polished world audiences associated with the Harrison name. Investigators pieced together a timeline suggesting Adam had likely passed away sometime around January 17th, roughly 2 days before he was actually discovered, meaning he had been alone during his final moments inside a small guest house tucked away from the main property where his family lived. Roughly a week after Adams's death, Rick Harrison spoke publicly for the first time about what had actually happened. He confirmed to reporters that his son had died from a Rick used the moment not just to grieve, but to speak out forcefully about the wider crisis affecting families across the entire country, saying more needed to be done to address substance crossing into communities like his own. It was a rare moment of raw honesty from a man usually associated with sharp business deals and television fame, choosing instead to speak candidly about heartbreak playing out inside his own home. For a family whose public image had always centered around toughness and sharp instincts at the negotiating table, this moment showed a very different side, one built entirely around vulnerability instead of business. News outlets across the country picked up the story within days, and the tragedy quickly became a talking point far beyond entertainment circles, folding into a much larger national conversation about synthetic opioids and their growing presence in communities that once felt far removed from that kind of danger. The official findings changed everything. Less than 2 months after Adams's passing, the Clark County Coroner's Office in Nevada released its official findings. The final determination confirmed that Adam Harrison had died from and methamphetamine toxicity, and the death was officially ruled accidental. Itself is an extremely powerful synthetic substance, understood by health officials to be far stronger than many similar substances, with only a very small amount capable of proving fatal, depending on a person's size and tolerance. That detail alone helped explain how quickly and quietly a situation like this could turn deadly. For the Harrison family, the official ruling offered a small sense of clarity, even if it could never soften the loss itself. It confirmed what many had already suspected, that Adam had been struggling privately with substance use in the final stretch of his life, largely removed from the public image most people associated with his famous last name. Health officials across the country have repeatedly pointed to cases like this one as part of a much larger pattern, where synthetic substances mixed unknowingly with other substances have made far harder to predict and far more dangerous than in previous decades. Families from every background, famous or otherwise, have found themselves facing the exact same kind of sudden, devastating loss. What made the story resonate with so many viewers afterward, though, was not just the tragedy itself, but something deeper, hiding underneath it. The painful truth behind the silence. Adam Harrison spent his entire adult life standing beside one of the most famous businesses in America, surrounded by cameras, fame, and constant public attention, yet he remained almost completely invisible to the audience watching his own family. That invisibility may have carried a weight of its own. Being the unseen son in a famous household often means struggles stay hidden simply because nobody outside the family is looking closely enough to notice. Corey Harrison had an entire television show built partly around documenting his life. Adam had almost nothing publicly documented at all, until the very end. In a strange way, fame protected Corey by keeping people watching, while the lack of fame may have quietly isolated Adam instead, allowing serious struggles to develop largely out of sight. It raises an important and often overlooked point about families living partly in public and partly in private, where the family members furthest from the spotlight can sometimes be the ones struggling the most without anyone fully realizing it. That quiet contrast between two brothers, one constantly filmed and one almost never seen, may say more about this tragedy than any single item found inside that guest house ever could. It is worth remembering that being surrounded by a famous family does not automatically mean being surrounded by visibility or support. Sometimes the people standing closest to the spotlight are the easiest ones to overlook entirely. For the Harrison family, life after Adams's death has continued quietly, with Pawn Stars eventually entering an indefinite hiatus after years on the air. Rick and Corey have both continued honoring Adam's memory publicly from time to time, sharing old photographs and small tributes, keeping his name part of a family story that the cameras never fully captured while he was alive. Adam Harrison spent his life standing just outside the cameras that made his family famous. And in the end, that same distance may have hidden a struggle almost nobody around him fully saw coming. His story is a painful reminder that fame does not protect everyone equally, even within the very same household. What did everyone think about the part of this story that rarely gets told? Share a thought down below. Do not forget to like this video and subscribe for more real stories behind the families the world thinks it already knows.